Hi and welcome back to Virtual Done Well. The question this week is, where do I find a virtual assistant? So maybe you're toying with the idea of having some virtual assistant help in your business and you're thinking, where do I find them? Do I need full-time? Do I need part-time? I'm going to answer those questions coming right up. Hi, so this is Rob O'Byrne from Virtual Done Well, and I'm going to share some thoughts on where to find virtual assistants from my own background of using virtual assistants. So it's not sort of 100% comprehensive, but it will give you some really good ideas on where you can track down some great support for your business. Now, I should just point out, virtual assistant, what does that mean? I actually don't like that term because it kind of implies, I don't know, some kind of non-human remote thing helping you. Virtual assistants, if you use them or if you're soon to use them, you'll find out are really great integral members of your team. You know, I mean, they're real people. So don't think of them as this sort of, weird cloud-based remote help, and not at all. Okay, it's the wrong way to think about it. So I think we need to change the term virtual assistant to maybe a remote worker or something like that. So virtual assistant is the team that most people use. Where do we find them? Okay, so I first came across virtual assistants for task-based things. So very often the way that people get into utilizing virtual assistants is they have a particular task and they need someone to help them find someone to help them do that. So where can you go? Someone put me onto a site called Fiverr, and I always forget how it's spelt. It's F-I-V-V-R, I think. But if you just type Fiverr, you'll come across it. And this is a classic sort of gig-based type setup where lots of independent contractors all over the world basically offer you their services. It's called Fiverr, I think, because originally you could get anything done for $5. It's still called that, obviously, but really what happens now is you might find someone, you want them to do an infographic, or you want them to edit a video or something, and it's generally multiples of $5. So they might say, look, I'll edit a video for you and it's $10 per minute of editing or something like that. But it's a really great source. I've found some excellent people on there, but I would say it's good for kind of one-off things. So what have I had done there? I've had book covers designed. I've had people do voiceovers. I found a wonderful lady in Europe who I sent her a photograph and I said, look, I don't want to use this photograph in my event promotion because it's actually a photograph of someone else's event, but it kind of encapsulates the whole vibe of the event that I'm trying to do. I said, could you turn it into a sketch? And she probably did it, using a bit of software in 2 minutes, but it came back brilliant. It's like this artist's impression of this event, and it was perfect. So it was the first time I'd run that event, so I didn't have any pictures of it. So I had to use this kind of sketch, and it worked really well. So you'd be amazed at the people. So jump onto Fiverr. You can find people kind of doing all kinds of stuff on there. But I would say it's good for kind of one-off things. If you need kind of ongoing support, it's probably not ideal. So where else can you go? For many years, I used a site called Elance. I don't know, I must have put 100 different tasks up on Elance over the years, probably more. It's a little bit, I would say, kind of higher level, and I should add, Elance doesn't exist anymore. It was taken over or bought out or whatever by a company called Upwork. I will confess, I used to love Elance. I'm not a fan of Upwork. It's got a different feel to it now. The interface is harder to use. I don't go on there much anymore, to be honest, but the concept is great. It's still a great resource to find contractors, freelance people to help you out. I have recently used some people on Upwork. What for? I needed some web pages translated into Thai and Chinese. Great, got that done. In the past, I've had writing tasks done, design tasks, all kinds of stuff. Where you're looking for a professional to do something for you, and again, it's very much task-based, project-based. Upwork and sites like it are great. But let me give you some tips on using these sites, because you can waste a bit of time and money initially. So on Fiverr, for example, that example I was talking about where I wanted a sketch done, I actually got 3 people to do that job. It was a rush job. I can't remember how much I paid. I was paying $10 each. I couldn't risk the sort of 2-day turnaround time and then get something back which wasn't what I wanted. So I actually gave the job to 3 different people. So if you're under a bit of time pressure, do that. You know, generally you're not paying a lot of money anyway, and it's a good way to test out different contractors, and then you find a good one, you go back. I've done exactly the same thing on, as it's now called, Upwork. Recently I wrote another book, and it's called More Time, More Money, which is about virtual assistants. So I wrote that, and I wanted to have it professionally proofread, so I found a proofreader on Upwork. Cost me, I don't know, $200 to have the whole book professionally proofread. And then I needed the book typeset, so it's laid out in a particular way, ready for printing. Again, that cost about $200, I think, to have that done. So it's a great place to find those sorts of professionals. And you may have, you know, ongoing project work where you're going back, you know, to get things done time and time again. And you can form very good relationships with those people. Back in the Elance days, I was utilizing, you know, freelance people there for years. You know, we just had an ongoing relationship where, oh, I've got a, you know, another book to be proofread or another thing to be designed, whatever it was, and I just utilise the same people all the time. So, but they're generally for project or task-based things. Where we get into the realms then of virtual assistants, I tend to think of those more as like full-time support, and really you've got 2 options then. So the 2 options are generally home-based and office-based. So where do you find a good virtual assistant company? That's pretty tricky, to be honest. There are loads of them out there. There's probably geographically 3 types of virtual assistant. There's virtual assistants in your home country, and I've recently seen some great websites from virtual assistant companies in Australia and New Zealand and the US. It's really big there. And what you find is, you know, people working in a professional environment have come out of corporate and now they're working from home. You know, maybe they've been a personal assistant at a very high level and now they're doing that from home. So you can access some really great quality resources that way, locally. There's lots of pluses with that, obviously, you know, language, culture, all that kind of stuff. The big negative, of course, is cost. And, you know, if you didn't really sort of appreciate the cost factors with virtual assistants, if you're working in a major economy like, you know, Europe, Australia, Canada, US, if you look at the local costs of a virtual assistant versus, say, a company in the Philippines one or Indian one is probably going to be about 10% of the cost. Yes, it's that different. Will you get the same level of resource? Almost. I'd say, you know, taking the sort of language and culture bit maybe knocks it down a little bit, but probably 90% if you pick some really good people. But that 10% cost is phenomenal. You know, what that means is you can have a lot more support staff, you get a lot more bang for your buck, and you can get lots more stuff done. So if I look at my own situation, you know, I started off 8 years ago with 1 personal assistant based in the Philippines. I now obviously own an outsourcing company. That's what this channel is all about. But personally, I have a team of 6 looking after me. I have 10 supporting my own business, Logistics Bureau. And then I have 6 looking after me, and I'm about to hire 2 more. So, you know, if you think of the economics of it, I'm getting that whole team probably for the cost of 1 person in my home country. That's the big benefit. But I digress a bit. Where can you find these virtual assistants? So home-based can be really good. What you'll generally find then, you know, they're quite professional, they're working from home and supporting you, you know, part-time or full-time, whatever you think you need. There are some downsides to that though. But depending where they are, and a lot of the overseas virtual assistants are in India and the Philippines, I tend to favour the Philippines because the language and culture is a better fit for me. some of the downsides there are power cuts, internet cuts. That person's working independently on their own, and so you're never quite sure kind of what they're up to. They'll generally have more than one client. So, your work's getting prioritized with others. And I've used a few home-based VAs, and I just found the relationship was a little bit harder to manage, to be honest. So I tend to favor the office-based. Now, if you jump on and say, Virtual Assistant Philippines, you're going to be inundated with virtual assistant companies, So how do you go about picking one of those? Personal recommendation, I think, is always really important. So do you know people who are using a virtual assistant company? Have they had a good experience? Also, have a really good look at the websites, and you'll get a flavour of the sort of culture of the business and how they're set up. And I might actually, I'll share a couple of stories about that just to warn you about some of the things to look for. I would always want to be talking to people in the business. So the first time I utilised virtual assistants was through a big call centre in the Philippines. All of my contact was through a sort of supervisor level. I couldn't talk to management, couldn't talk to the owner. I couldn't really talk to the staff, only the ones that I was interviewing. It all seemed fine at the time, but looking back on it, those were probably sort of warning signs that I would look out for now. I'd want to see some evidence on the website or on social media of how the staff were being treated and how the staff were happy, if they're happy or not, staff feedback, things like that. I'd want to talk to some people definitely in the management structure. So, if you're thinking of a virtual assistant and you want to have a look at our company, Virtual Done Well, by all means, you can talk to supervisors, managers, you can talk to me if you like, not a problem. And we can tell you exactly what goes on. I think that sort of openness is really important, but that's hard to get through a website, isn't it? Some of the things to look for, and some of the things that can go wrong, perhaps, with virtual assistant companies. I was talking to our operations manager over in Davao City this morning because she's done a fantastic job, and a big shout out for Evelyn. She's doing a fantastic job on recruiting some great staff for our business, and particularly over the last couple of years, we've just kind of hit the groove. We've got some brilliant people and created this great culture in the business, real family atmosphere, which is wonderful. I love going over there. But I was asking Evelyn about some upcoming roles and some of the people that we have, coming through the recruitment process. And I told her I was going to be making this video, and what are some of the things that people ought to be looking out for? And she said, it's interesting. She said, I've had a couple of people apply from one of the big call centres, not too far away from us. And she said, there's some real horror stories going on. So obviously I'm not going to name that company, but I just want to make you aware that there are good virtual assistant companies and not so good. So what goes on in some of the not so good ones? I'd try and find out how much people are getting paid, to be honest. Sometimes, if you look at the proportion that you, the client, are paying the virtual assistant company and how much the actual VA is getting, the one that we're talking about, I think the VA is probably getting about 20 to 25% of what the client's paying. I think, to be fair, that's got to be around the 50% mark. Obviously, there's management overheads and all the rest of it, but yeah, the VA should be, in terms of income, getting about half of that, I would have thought. So try and find out about the income. The management structure is really important. In Virtual Done Well, for example, our own business, we have dedicated team leaders looking after the virtual assistants. In a lot of the big BPOs, business process outsourcing centres, those team leaders also have clients, so they don't have a lot of time to spend supporting and looking after the virtual assistants. Our team leaders are only team leaders, and they don't have huge teams, so we're providing a much higher level of support. The other thing is, some of the bad stories that I've heard recently, people trying to sort of push staff to meet quotas. So you can imagine on some of these big call centres where they're doing outbound calls and things like that, they have certain quotas to meet on the number of calls, number of sales or whatever, and it can be very draconian, the whole environment that the people are working in. We recently had someone come in for an interview who to be honest, it was, almost post-traumatic stress disorder. The person was visibly extremely upset with the whole experience and had been under immense pressure. You can imagine you've got to do this number of calls a day, the supervisors are pushing them, they're saying, no, you can't go for lunch break yet, you haven't hit your quota, maybe they're supposed to have a break at 12 and they can't get to break until 3. I've heard that kind of thing a lot, actually, where, they can't even get away for bathroom breaks. Then if they're not hitting their quotas, they basically get bullied and, humiliated in front of the team to the extent that they're forced out of the business, So hopefully the very few are like that, but those are sometimes the sort of environments that they're working in, and I think, how do you find out about those? You just got to do your due diligence, and don't take things at face value. Dig away, look for references, talk to clients, that kind of thing. So, how do you pick a virtual assistant company? Try and talk to management, try and talk to some of the VAs, talk to friends. Like I say, if you're considering virtual assistants and you want to try us out, by all means, pick up the phone, say, I want to talk to the operations manager, I want to talk to the CEO, I'm happy to talk to you. Let you talk to some of our staff and so on. I think you've got to be comfortable about the way that things are run, and that you get a good values fit. Okay, sorry, I rambled on a bit there. I was just thinking about the conversation I had with Evelyn this morning. It was, it's not pleasant to hear that sort of stuff going on. So if you're trying to find a virtual assistant, what have we covered? Go to sites like Fiverr, Upwork, and there are others, just look out for them. Those are great when you want individual projects done or tasks done. If you want more sort of full-time support, by all means look at Homebased. There are some downsides of that. Personally, I would always go for office-based. Interestingly enough, another conversation I was having very recently with Evelyn, our operations manager, was that over the last couple of years, we've had clients kind of steal our virtual assistants, which is, I don't know, to my mind, that's a bit unethical, isn't it? What tends to happen is they'll build up a good relationship with the virtual assistant, and they say, if you want to go and work at home, we're happy to pay you a little bit more, and it's kind of a win-win. I think it's a bit of a nasty way to do business, but hey, that's life. That's happened a couple of times, and what's really interesting is it never lasts. For some of the reasons that I've talked about, home-based versus office-based, they find in the office-based environment, the virtual assistant was working really well. Now they're working at home. The same disciplines aren't in place, and they've got, maybe family pressures around them, and they've got all the, the issues of IT support and internet support, and things start to crumble a bit. And interestingly enough, Evelyn was saying the average is it lasts about 5 months. And it just doesn't work out, that's pretty sad. What then sometimes, we tend to know that, you're probably wondering why, because the virtual assistant will come back to us because they're looking for proof of employment because they have to go and find another job. I'm not sure exactly how the regulations work on that, but they basically have to get certificates and so on from previous employers to apply for other jobs. So that's kind of how we find out what's gone on. So, it's just another, I suppose, indicator that sometimes home-based doesn't work quite as well as the office-based. And if you're wondering, what is the benefit of office-based? Sorry, I'm conscious I'm rambling a bit here, but I think some of this information is quite handy. What are you getting? You're paying a little bit more generally for an office-based VA, so you're getting that, that team leader supervision, you're getting all the HR support. You can be assured that all the statutory payments are being done, the health insurance, the taxes, all that's above board, IT support, management support. We really sort of look after our team. They're like our family. Everything is there for them, and that's the difference. And it's all focused on obviously making sure that our staff are well looked after and cared for and happy, because we want them to stay for a long time. All of that helps our clients get a great service as well. You've got a happy VA, you've got a happy client. So that's kind of the difference, if you're trying to weigh up the home-based versus office-based. So a bit of a ramble. It wasn't kind of meant to be a ramble, but where do you find the VAs? Just to recap, you know, Fiverr, Upwork, great for project work. Then if you're looking for a more permanent sort of support base, do your research, do your due diligence, ask around. You know, there's Facebook groups and so on where people use lots of virtual assistant companies, find out which are the good ones, and then make sure that you do talk to management and get a feel for the culture of the business and is it a good one that you're going to be working for. Okay, so let's cut it there. Enough rambling for this week. I hope that's of value. Do ask any questions that you like down below. I will personally answer all of those. If you're not subscribed, do hit the subscribe button, hit the bell. That way you get notified every time a new video comes out. And videos are generally coming out on a Wednesday, Australian time. I'm based in Sydney. And we'll see you next week. Thank you for joining us.